Hello and welcome to this iMeshh tutorial video, and this one is a little bit different. Somebody has sent in their chest of drawers that they have designed, and they are looking for some tips on how to get going and how to start selling products, and I think kind of the things to look for to make objects sellable basically. And he sent me in his product, and he has also sent in a render that he has created of the product, and I will go over a few things that I would probably fix inside of here. And then I'll go to the materials, and then I'll go to rendering and do the whole shebang. And hopefully by the end of it you would have picked up some good tips on things to look for when you yourself are making some products. Okay, so first things first, I'm just going to add some screencast keys. There we go. I'll make these a bit bigger, maybe like this. And I will try to say everything that I'm doing, but if I don't say it, then maybe just reference this. Right, okay, so I would start off with a few things which I immediately notice, and one of those is the shading, and you can see that and you can kind of see that in the render as well. And so I know that there is some smooth shading applied to this surface here, and you can kind of see it here that the Blender doesn't really know where it's meant to be smooth and where it's not meant to be. So you can kind of see a gradient and light, whereas this is meant to be completely flat. And there are certain ways to kind of fix that, and one way is to just do a quick way. And go to here and click auto smooth, and then that automatically fixes this like this, as you can see. So this is now a completely flat face, but the problem with that is that there are still some very sharp edges which you'd want to fix anyway. I try not to tick this myself because other programs don't necessarily have this button. So if you import a model which with this turned on into something like 3D Studio Max, for example, it won't then be shaded in the correct way. So what I like to do is just add a few supporting edges anyway, because it only takes a few seconds, and then other people can use them if they want to. The first thing I do is just do Control R and click here, and do Control B and just make this edge here, and do another one here, and bring this here. So what this is doing is creating a few extra edges along this bit, so it knows where it's meant to be flat and where it's not meant to be flat. So you just need a few extra edges. So if I turn this back off again, it was already off. You can see that this face has been fixed, but then this face still has kind of a gradient there. Another things I immediately notice is actually this face is incorrect. So this face, let me turn this on so you can actually see it. There's an inside which I think maybe was an accident, and you forgot to make this face. But I would quickly make it now because this is quite easy to fix. So if I just go into edit mode and just click on this object, on the one that you want to edit, if it is in separate parts, which I think it is, and do Control L, and you select just that part, and then do Control I, and then press H. You can hide everything else. So now we can just concentrate on this when we're in edit mode. And I just want to see if this is okay. So I've just tried to select this edge, but I can see that it's also selecting this one. So you press Alt and then click. It tries to select the inside edge, but this is going in here. So there's something wrong here. So I think you've tried to bevel the edge, but it's got a bit confused. I think maybe because there was a face missing. So honestly, the easiest way to fix this is to just recreate this this face completely. So I'll just do that really quickly. So if this object is in dead center, which I think it is, that's really funny. Yeah. Okay. So then I'll just separate this from the rest of the object. So I'm going to do Alt H and select this one, and this one, and do Control L and then P and separate from the object, and then do Control A and add a new plane. Oh, sorry, add a new cube. So let's move this over to here. Oops, in edit mode, I want to move it over because I still want the origin point to be in the dead center. And now I'm just going to solo these so I can just kind of work on this. So let's just try and make it. I'm going to press Shift and Tab, and then that turns this on. This is snapping. So now if I click on Vertex and do G and X, it will snap to your shape. So now I can kind of make this really quickly and get the same proportions without having to mess around. So let's do the same with this one. G and Y. G and Y. Okay, so now we have this one object here. So I'm just going to select the old one and press H to hide that, and then click on this one and go and add a mirror. So now we have one on both sides. and now this is looking a bit better. So we actually have a face, and because you don't want to have a object which is completely 2D, which you had previously. And now we have this one. What we can do is do Control A and apply the scale, and then add a bevel. See, I don't really like to add bevel in the object itself. I try to add bevel wherever possible as a modifier, and then apply it later because it's not destructive. So now I'll just drag this all the way down. Okay. And yeah, you can add a couple more. You can do whatever you want here. So I'm just going to do it like this, and that should be fine. Okay, and one thing I've also noticed that you're working in inches. I think that should be fine. There's just one thing I noticed is that Blender actually has its default units to be meters, and 3D Studio Max actually uses centimeters and meters. And I would ideally try to keep this in a metric units if possible, because I don't know if this will cause some kind of conflict if you try to import these objects, these units, into another platform which is using a different units. So I try to keep it in metrics, and then you should be kind of good to go. So now I also noticed, I had a look at this earlier, is that there's another completely flat face here. So just click this one, do Control L, and this is just a plane. And this is another thing which you really should try to avoid, because in reality you'd never have an object which is completely 2D unless it's graphene. I think that's actually 2D. So I'm just going to delete this one and then click on this one, because I know that this object is actually mirrored already. I'm just going to do Control L, Shift D, and bring it over here and rotate it on the axis and just try to bring it back into place. I mean, you don't need to use this because it's mirrored. You can do it whichever way you like. And these are overlapping, I think, which is not good. Okay, that should be fine. And I'm going to grab this face and do Y, sorry, and I'm going to delete this face. Actually, I'm going to move it over to the over here first. With where's it gone? Clipping turned on, and bring it as far as it will go, and then press X and delete the face. And now that will be a merged face, and it will work perfectly. So now you have a nice solid back and edges with a nice bit of bevel. Another thing I noticed, I'm really sorry for really picking this model apart, but I really hope that you're going to learn something, and maybe you'll be able to take this forward to your next project. So one thing to note is that if you can see a line like this one here and this one here on the outside of the object, it means that that edge is not really connecting to something, or it's not connecting properly. It means that it's not. So for example, if I click on this face, it's selecting the whole face, whereas you'd imagine it will just select this one or this one. So this is a problematic face. So I'm going to do Control L and select this whole thing. I'm just going to separate it and then go into local view, and we'll just see what's going on here. So I think I'm actually going to okay, that edge is not there anymore. Okay, let's come out here. Let's just hide this, and this edge is actually just floating. Okay, so we can just remove that. Perfect. So now I'm just going to go back into this face anyway, and there's one thing I've noticed, that you applied a bevel, but it looks like you didn't apply the scale first, and it's quite easy to fix because you can see that if you applied the bevel with scale applied, it would have applied the bevel evenly, but it's kind of skewed it one way because you probably stretched it along the axis this way. So if you don't want to make this whole face again, the one thing you can do is just go into here and go wireframe and just select these faces and press F3 and type in shear, which apparently is Shift Control Alt S. I'll give that a go. Shift Control Alt S, and then it's not working right now, so you need to press either X, that's not that one, or press Y, and you can see, okay, Y is the correct axis to turn on, and you want to try and make this go about 45 degrees like this. Okay, and we'll do the same for this side. What was it? Control Shift Alt S and Y. Okay, and that is fixed there, but it won't be fixed over this side. So what I'm actually going to do is mirror both sides, because it's easier than trying to make these match this side when you can just mirror it. I know that I use mirror a lot, but I think that it saves me a lot of time down in the end. So okay, press J. So I'm just trying to connect these two. Also notice that your face doesn't have a bottom edge either, which is something that I would try to do. So now there's a center. I'll just delete this, and I'm going to add a mirror. But your origin point is over here, so I'm going to make the origin point go straight back to the center again by object set origin to 3D cursor. If the 3D cursor was over here, for example, what I do know is that I did already make an object earlier which does have the origin in the right place. So I could just click on this object, do Shift S and cursor to selected, then click on this one, go back to local view and do object, set origin to 3D cursor. So now it's back in the middle again. So now if I add a mirror, it should be working nicely. So okie dokie. And now what I'm going to do is just add a bottom face. So I'm going to do Alt and click on the bottom edge and press F, and now we have a bottom edge. And so that's just kind of a general rule. Try not to miss any back faces because it can mess with the shading, and I think it's a more professional just to make sure all the edges are clean and how they would be in reality. So what I'm going to do now is I want to add I want to inset this face, because what I'm going to do is just kind of fix this shading, and to do that is just to add some more geometry. So okay, so actually first I'm going to apply the scale. Okay, and it's actually fixed some shading as well, I think. Okay, so now I can go press I again, and now it's insetting correctly. And if I just click this, and if you saw my last tutorial, I had the similar problem. So when you're insetting and you have mirror turned on, it ignores the mirror, but you can fix that by clicking one of these. Okay. Am I being stupid? Oh, boundary. Oh god. Okay, that's the one. So so now it's including the mirror in that. So now we have some extra geometry, and I might probably do the same for the top side. There's something funny going on here. Okay, I think that there's an edge missing. And how is it over here? So if you click on click on any object and you want to go straight to that, you can press full stop on the number pad, and it takes you right there. Okay, so there is an edge going this way and this side, but over on this side, whoop, there is not. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just have that one selected and press E and bring this over to over here with clipping turned on, so it's in the center. And okay, that's funny. So this face isn't actually straight, but that doesn't matter. I'm going to keep it as it is. So I'm going to press G and Y and bring this over to this one. I'm going to click on this, and I think actually I need to remove the top face actually, because I think that will get a bit confusing. So now we have these selected. Let's click these two faces, edges, press F. So now that is fixed, and now I can press this on the top and press F. Now we have another face. Okay, so now I'm going to press I and add some geometry here, and now because you added extra geometry, you can kind of if you didn't want to have auto smooth turned on, then that helps that situation. So I can grab these edges which I want to be super sharp. I'm going to remove this one actually because it might be in the wrong place. I'm going to select these ones and do Control B, or you could add the bevel modifier if you like to. Actually, let's do that. So bevel. I'm going to set it to angle, and I'm going to turn this right down. Okay, so just a nice little bevel, so it's just on the edge. You can add a little bit more geometry there if you want to, and you can see as you do that, you can see that the shading is kind of becoming more clear as you add more geometry. But don't go overboard. I think that should be fine. Okay, so there's that face, and that face, and that is fine. I don't think I'll go into these ones here because that's kind of a similar problem to the top, that there is no back edge onto this one either. And as it is a drawer, it would be nice if you did make the inner drawer as well, but it's not the end of the world. It kind of depends on its purpose. If it's going into 3D visualization in a place which you don't think people will be opening it, then it's okay to leave it, but it's kind of better to do it just in case anyway. Because yeah, so I don't think there's anything behind these. So yeah, it's just a flat bit. And there's another point with these. These are also really sharp edges. So I'll probably just select this face, control, apply the scale. If you want to see quickly if you need to apply the scale, you just go to item and look at the dimensions. So these should all be, sorry, scale. These should all be 1, but these are not. So if you press Control A, apply the scale, and now the scale is back to 0. So now if you add a bevel, it will apply it correctly. Yeah, that's fine. It doesn't need to be much. It's stopping itself from beveling anymore because there's quite a lot of tight edges here, which you can remove if you like to, but I mean they're fine as they are. So just letting you know. Okay, I think that is fine for now. There's kind of actually there was also another problem here, which I will explain. So this there's not a back face either. Okay, so I'm probably going to just rebuild this because it's. Let me have a look at this. So I'm going to do Control L. I'm going to grab both. Control I, and actually no, Control Z, and separate that so I can go just go into local mode because I think I'm going to remove them anyway. So I think that there's some funny faces going on here. Yeah. Yeah, so I'm just going to rebuild this and I'll show you how I would build it, and then because I think that it got a bit confusing up at the top, and then trying to apply the bevel afterwards it won't really know what it's trying to do. So because I think this is actually also a face which is facing outwards, and it would be nice to have a bit of a bevel on that side too. So okay, so I'm just going to go and rebuild this. So there are many different ways of building this, and I'll show you just one way, I think. Actually, just to make things in the center, I'm going to click on this object, do Shift S, cursor to selected, and now I can add a cube, go into edit mode, and now if I add a mirror, it's going to do it to both sides. Okay, so let's try and build this thing for you. And once I've finished with this, I will send the video to the guy who created it, Derek actually, and if you do make these amends and you want to upload this object onto iMeshh for free, because it's free to sell on iMeshh, I will put a link in the description so people can go and purchase his product if they want to. So, okay, let's grab this whole thing and move it over, and I'm going to turn snapping back on so I can just make sure that it snaps to the correct side. Okay. And I'm just going to move this over just so I can see what's going on with this piece. So this curve at the bottom is funny. There's many different ways of doing it, and I think it depends on the application, and I like adding more geometry and loop cuts and subdividing because I am only really using architectural visualization. Having more geometry is not the end of the world. Like, I can end up with scenes of 10-15 million faces when I'm adding assets from all over the place. As long as it renders and it looks good, I don't care about poly count. But if this is going to be used in a game engine, then this way of doing it is perfectly fine because it's also quite low poly too. So, but I'm going to show you just a quick way of doing this. So I'm sure this is the method that you use too. So I'm clicking this face and do E and Z. And I can just grab this and do Control B. Do I have a scale applied? Yeah, and just do Control B. So what you would need to do now is use the mouse wheel to roll to make sure you have enough edges that it's going to be smooth, whereas yours is, you can see the edges are quite sharp. So that is also fine, and then you can then add the bevel to the outside. Just sorry to show you quick dirty. Ooh, okay. Which will look fine, and yes, for most applications, but I'll show you another way to do this if you don't want to do that. So yeah, so let's just undo this. Ooh, how many times did I undo? Okay, so I'm just going to add a couple more loops, and then I'm going to add this not actually to the edge of your object. And this might not necessarily be the right way either, but it's kind of what I do sometimes. So, Okay, let's add another one here. Okay, that's not really the cleanest thing in the world, but never mind, that's perfectly fine. And then what I can do is add a bevel, and let's turn this down, and a few, and set this to angle, and make sure it's not doing it to these edges too, because if it's too low, it's going to start beveling these edges, which I don't want it to. I just want to bevel the edges there, so that's fine. And add a couple more, and then you can add the subdivision surface. So, and I can see that this edge is not looking quite right. It's kind of going inside, so I need to add just one more supporting edge here, and it should tighten everything up. And then I can do shade smooth, and that is, I think, easier because now I can add subdivision or turn subdivision down, and it's not destructive because I've only got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Whereas if I was to try to do the same method on yours, it could cause some problems. I don't think I'll actually bevel correctly, but you'll end up with kind of bad geometry in the end. And at least now I have a bit more control. But I think that's completely up to you. So yeah, I'm going to leave that like that. But now I need to add this. Actually, I need to add another loop cut here. So you can see the shading as I bring this up. It's kind of tightening up as I bring this here. So there we go. And now add a loop here. And now I'm just going to make this top edge. And E. And G and Z. Okay, so my viewport's going quite slow. I find that's also because the quality. You can set this to 1, and I find this to be perfectly fine normally. So, okay. And I'm just going to add a bit more loop cuts here. So that's what I mean. You end up with more loop cuts, which it depends on the purposes, and that is fine. So now I can just remove this one and go in, and there. So now we have a nice beveled edge here, and yeah, I'll do the same similar thing for here, and try to go around and clean up all these edges. Perfect. So now I think that is fine, and you can then go do the rest to here if you want to. And now we'll move to texturing. So I know that this one isn't actually the one in the folder. So I'll go to the one that you supplied, which was in this render. And I think, so the first thing that I notice with this texture is that it's quite low resolution. Oh, there's not one there. And materials are, I would say, like 70 or 80% of the actual realism of the model. Like you can make the most beautiful model in the world, but then if the materials are not so good, then you'll be running into problems. And so I'm just trying to see. So you mixed this in with the black. So I guess you're trying to make a more dark material. So am I in Eevee? Oh, I'm in cycles. Let's go to Eevee and see how this looks here. Whoopsie daisy, I need to add a HDR. A quick tip for HDRs: if you're just using it for the purposes of lighting, 1K is absolutely fine. 1K will look identical to a 16K HDR in terms of lighting, but if you're using it for product shots where it has reflections or maybe through glass, or you will see the HDR in any way, then you'll need a high one, because if this reflects here, you'll see a really pixelated flower. So 1K is fine, and this is actually from this guy called, what's his name? Jorgen HDRI, and these are free samples, and I would highly recommend check them out. This HDR in particular is one of my favorites. It always looks natural. So yeah, and also it means that your program will run quicker because it's only 1K. Okay, so there's some quick things we can do to this to make it better. Let's actually add, so we can have a bit more detail in the model. Okay. So I personally wouldn't use this texture because it's quite low resolution. On iMeshh, we do actually have some woods completely for free, and these 4 we are allowing people to download and use for free in their models if it helps you to sell. But all the other woods on iMeshh, sorry, they're off limits. But these 4, go crazy and apply them to all your models. I think I'll probably actually use one of these when I go to render your this in the end. But for now I'll show you how I would maybe try and make this material a little bit better inside a blender, but then I'll switch to this and see if there's much of an improvement. So this is just a wood diffuse texture. Normally when you download a texture, it should come with a diffuse, a normal, and a glossy at least. But this one, because you've only got this, which is still fine, there are still some things that you can do to work with it. So I'm just going to add, if you go to Edit Preferences and turn on Node Wrangler. Now what you can do is just select the one that you like and press Control Shift. Oh, sorry. Oh, it did work. Oh god, I kept pressing the button. I couldn't work out why it's not working. So you press Control Shift and click, and then it selects just that shader that you want it to. So you can concentrate on the materials or whichever part, and it's really, really helpful. So I'm gonna actually take this one off of here and set this to black, just so I can see what's going on. And if I put this one into roughness, Blender will try to work out where the highlights are and where the dark bits are, and you can kind of see that now it has a texture to it when there isn't actually any diffuse texture on there. If you want to kind of have a better idea of what you're actually doing, you can just add a hue saturation and turn this down to 0. And I believe that this roughness doesn't actually use color anyway, but just for your own purposes, you know, now you can look at this and know that if this was a value of 2, it would be rougher. The closer it is to white, the more rough the object would be. So if I look at this, so now it's going to be really, really rough. But if I set this down to 0.2, it's going to be really dark and it's going to be really glossy. So so that is fine. So I'm just going to plug that in there and see how that looks. Okay, so I think this is not being picked up at all. Let's just set this back to 1 because that was actually quite nice. Okay, and what you can actually do is you can get a normal map out of this too. So if you just press click on one of these and put this into here, put this into height, yep, and just press Control Shift on this and you can see what's going on. So this is incredibly rough, so I'm going to turn this right down. Actually, just plug this into here so we can see what's going on. Did I explain why I make this black? So that you can more easily see the reflections and bump. So that is crazy too much. I can also see that the tiling is just a little bit too, it's not tiled enough. So you can click on this object and do Control T and it adds a mapping node, and now you can just add a scale. So 3 or 4, and you can see that it's making this is tiling the object. But then you have to make sure obviously that this is a tileable material, which I think it is. Yep, but I think that's a bit too much. So anyway, 2 should be fine. And then let's see how this looks with it all plugged in. And okay, I mean this bump is a bit too much. I'd probably go way less. 0.05, it may probably even less than that. But like this isn't an ideal way of making bump anyway, because it will. Oh, well, this actually I need to unwrap. I'll do that in a second. Because a normal map has a lot more detail and a lot more information, but this is a really quick way of adding bump if you don't have a normal map. So I'm going to unwrap this object. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So let's go to here, and I'm just going to apply the mirror because I don't need that anymore. And the bevel is fine. I'm just going to select this bottom edge. Okay, just this bottom edge. I don't think I've selected that correctly. That's terrifying. Okay, and I've just noticed actually that I don't really want to add. I was going to add a seam here, but because it's beveled, it will actually add multiple seams on each of the bevel points. I can show you what I mean. So if I add actually right click and mark seam, and then if I apply this, there'll be multiple seams, which is not ideal. So actually I'm just going to turn that off. I'm just going to add one more loop here and then mark that one as a seam, or right click. I keep forgetting about that. So now I can select the whole object and press U and unwrap. And this one is looking a bit funny, so I'm going to see if this makes any difference. Conformal, and that is doing exactly what I want. So I'm only going to add one seam going around the edge because I kind of want the wood to go like this and over the edges, and there won't be too much distortion because it's quite a flat object anyway. So now we can just check that the grain is going the right way, which is actually something I noticed you did actually. All the grain is kind of going in the right direction along the whole object, which is good. So that is perfect. Let's just grab this face and rotate that 90 degrees. Okay, perfect. And okay, so I need to do the same for this one, so I'm gonna just, what you could do is just select the whole thing and press U and Smart UV unwrap if you just want to do it quickly. But so that kind of does a good job. But if you, I mean, I can show you how I would unwrap it if you want me to. So okay, so I think I'm going to just leave the bevel applied for now, just for speed, and I'm just going to just figure out which faces I want for the seam to be visible and which faces I don't want it to be visible. So I think this should be fine actually. Okay. Let's see how this looks. So this top piece, I know that it doesn't really matter how it looks because I think it's completely covered anyway. And now we can just do right click and do mark seam and unwrap. And did that do that correctly? I don't know. Let's go to material view. Have I got the wood selected? Oh, the wrong one. Okay. Okay, yeah, that kind of did a okay job, I think. And let's just turn the whole thing 90 degrees. Okay, so let's have a look at this seam again. What did I do here? So I just made an edge, and I try to keep this front face untouched because I know that people will see these edges, and it kind of did a good job. I think that should be fine for this. It might go a little bit funny down the bottom, but that should be fine, I think. Okay, and this one I'm just going to press A and Smart UV unwrap and make sure I've got the wood applied and rotate it 90 degrees. Okay, cool. So now I can also see that you try to mix this with black, so I'm guessing you were trying to make the wood a bit darker. One thing I try to do is try to keep everything within one node if it is possible, and because what it does is it keeps things a bit tidier. And now you have two nodes, whereas I think you're just trying to affect the diffuse color. So it's quite unnecessary to add a whole new thing here. So I'm just going to add this one, and you can leave these ones away, and just affect the actual diffuse. So there are different ways to make things a bit darker. So you could do what you're doing, which was, mix RGB, and plug this one into here. Set this one to black, which I think you actually made it full 100% black, which is never possible in reality unless it's made out of Vanta black, which is not not made on most furniture, I don't believe. So yeah, let's just plug this in. Just press this so I can see what's going on. So now this is mixing the two, and let's set this to almost black. And yes, and then we can do what you did and do this if you like. So that's one way. Or you can add a hue saturation node and affect the value. So you can turn this right down if you want to, or maybe affect this as well. Or there's another way, and you can add a color ramp, but then what this does is actually creates more contrast, which might not be ideal, but it's kind of different things you can do. So this can make things more black, but then you still have the highlights too. So I probably wouldn't do that one. I'd probably work with this one if it was me. Okay, there we go. So now we have an object which has a bit more detail. And I think you also forgot to unwrap this, so let's just select these two and do quick and dirty Smart UV unwrap, which generally does quite a good job anyway. So let's oh, you actually have another material for this. Maybe that was intentional, but the material doesn't have anything. So kind of a general rule, I would try to at least have something in the roughness, because it's very rare that you have a completely 100% clean object which also has no normal. but for bare minimum, I would at least try to have something in the roughness. So for now, I'm just going to actually just make this object. I'm just going to make these have the stained wood. Just, why not? Okay, and I would also try to make the scale the same on the whole of the object. If you're not sure if each individual part has a... Okay, now I was actually just checking, because something was looking a bit weird, so I had a look at this part here, and I turned on face orientation, and now you can see that this object actually has a incorrect face orientation, so I'm just going to do Shift N and it will recalculate it, and Shift N. Okay. Oh, and you do the rest, and also to this one. That one's funny. Okay. Now I can just turn that back off again, and I can't remember what I was saying now. Okay, so I think that that's fine for this object, but what I would try to do now, I'm actually going to apply another wood and see if it will make an improvement. Okay, so I've just tried wood 58, and that one I quite like. But the problem is that now the wood grain is going completely the wrong direction on the whole of the object, so I'm just going to select every item and go into edit mode, select everything, and just go to the UV editor and click on this and press R and then 90. If you didn't want to do that, you could also go to the mapping node and rotation Z 90. Either way, whichever one you think's best. So let's do the same for this one. Let's change this to wood 58, wood 58, and wood 58. So I think that that's quite a nice wood, and it I think it fits, but that's up to you. You don't need to do this if you don't want to. I see another issue here is that the grain isn't quite working correctly here. So these not connected. So these actually have a different... Just for simplicity, I'm just going to go to the front view and press U, and actually there's no back face on this, is there? So I think I can actually just press... I would just go around the whole mesh and actually just make sure that this whole thing's connected, and just press U and unwrap. And oh, it didn't like that. The scale is not applied, so apply the scale and press U, and we'll try that again. There we go. And I think I prefer the wood going this way on this one, but actually what I would also do is I would have this centerpiece going this way, but then I would make this wood piece go up and down, so I can show you what I mean. Okay, and then rotate that 90 degrees. So now this wood goes, now it's kind of like a separate frame, as you'd probably imagine there would be. So okay, so now this wood goes round like this, and okay, fine. I think I was actually going to say that you can check the UV size for all the objects just by going like this. So you can press Shift A and type in checker texture. Click, make that go there, and press Control T and make sure that it is coming out of the UV. And now we can kind of see the size of the boxes. So this box is really big, and this box is a bit smaller, and this one's even smaller still, and this one's even smaller, and this one is huge. So that's one thing you can do, just go around and make sure that all of the scale is the same for the whole object. So if we do something like this, and just grab this one, Control L, and scale this one up, just something roughly like this, and you can just go around and make sure this is all correct. Okay, and that's actually crazy. Let's scale this up. So now go back to rendered view and just delete these nodes. Okay, I'm going to keep this wood on for now. I'm going to show you how I would now render. And this is something that we also created for you, and it's called Product Lighting Scene. It's also free, and it's just kind of a quick drag and drop an item in and rearrange the 3-point lights how you like, and then you should be able to just hit render and create some nice renders of your objects. Because that's also something I noticed, that your object is not quite centered and a bit high up, and there's not really anything placing it on the floor. And I try to keep a little bit of shadow, so it feels a little bit more realistic, whereas yours is a bit floating, which can make it look a bit worse. So I'm going to load up that scene. Okay, and now we have the scene here, and I've actually been rearranging all of these lights already for different objects which I've been rendering. So I'll just add in your object now. So let's go back to the other scene, and let's just select this whole object, and let's just make it into one group. So I will just press Ctrl G and add it to a collection cabinet. You can of course merge all the objects if you want to, but if you want them to be separate, just make sure they're in actually a collection, or make sure everything's parented to something. So maybe parent it to the top, so select everything and click the last object you want it to parent to, and do Ctrl P and object and keep transformation. So now everything moves for that one, but ideally you try to merge everything into one object if you can. So let's just, this should be in, did I make a new collection? Cabinet, yeah, okay. So now I'm going to save this. Okay, now I'm going to go and merge it into this scene, so file append. And go to collection and, oh, that one. Okay, perfect. And this actually worked out really well. This actually looks like it's straight for this object. So now I'm just going to see how this looks. So actually this one has an edge, it's beveled, whereas the others don't. So that might look a bit funny. So let's go into rendered. And I'm just going to turn on GPU compute. Okay, and it's a bit blurry, so let's click on the camera. Is that selected, or? Yep. Okay, and then go to here and set the focal point to be the object. And you can just turn this off, and you can just see how this is looking. So I'm just going to see if I can work out a lighting which I think looks most dramatic. Let's just bring this floor up a little bit. Okay, and sometimes if this object is quite curved you can then see an edge on the top, but we're quite low down now so you won't see that. And yeah, I mean you can just spend hours on this. So the idea is to just try and make some contrast and just make some nice shadows in the right places. Okay, I'll probably actually make the environment a little bit brighter too. So I'm just going to go to the environment and set this to maybe 0.3. Okay, and let's just do a test render and see how this looks. Okay, and this render is almost finished now, and with the compositor it's going to then apply a nice white background. And the first thing I notice actually is that this object is quite dark compared to the background, so I'm actually going to brighten that up a bit. So I'll probably actually just do this through the just for the purposes of the video, because I know this is going on too far, but going on too long now, and I probably would do this in Photoshop or actually just rearrange the lighting. But where has it gone? Color management, there we go. So you can increase the exposure here if you like to, and then I would probably decrease this lighting anyway, but I think you get the idea. I'm going to leave this here now, I think, and I think I'll probably just do a dedicated video towards actually rendering, but this should give you some tips. So here I've tried to create a bit more of a impactful position, and it kind of has a nice stance to it, and it just looks interesting. Whereas this, it kind of has slanted edges, whereas I've tried to make the camera 90 degrees because it's the main product shot, and I've tried to make sure it's all centered and has some nice shadows. And you can see here the shadows, the shading on here is completely flat, whereas this still has that curve. So I think that I've made sense. I know I've kind of rushed over this, but I realize I've been talking for way too long now anyway. But I hope that I give you some tips and you can use this for your own 3D models. If anybody else is watching this has their own 3D models that they want me to critique and destroy, then feel free to send me the link and I will check it out. And then if you then upload it to iMeshh, then you can then I'll post the link in the description as well, so people can check it out. So yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon.